Ever since I posted my first machete video, I've gotten a lot of comments on how do you sharpen a machete, how do you put the modifications on your machetes. I just wanted to show here, I think this is probably my original 16-inch Tramontina. This is the machete I use most in Brazil. You can see it's got the short scandi section here. The blade has been convexed to the tip about 2/3 down. The back part of the spine is squared off, the front part is rounded. That way you can safely hold the back of the blade and use the blade as a draw knife with the scandi section, or you can hold it backwards and use the squared off spine as a planer. Pretty simple modifications, but they make the machete a much more versatile tool in the bush. It's been sharpened so many times that the scandi section is actually getting bowed in, so it's not, it's getting worn out. So I need to get a new one. And with that in mind, I went downtown the other day and bought two brand new 16-inch Tramontinas. The way they come from the factory, they're all but useless to me, so I'm going to put some modifications on at least one of these today, and I'll show you the process. The secret to the system is to get the handle of the blade away from the workbench. You have to be able to work at the very edge with a file. The only way to do that is to clamp the blade down so it's held out away from the workbench. Now, safety warning, do not walk away from a blade which is clamped to a workbench like this, or you're running the risk of having somebody walk into it. My son's head is right about there. I never leave a blade clamped like this. Also, you're filing towards the edge, so safety warning, don't cut your hand. You can see this is the factory edge that I've got here. And I'm going to want to take it down to a scandi grind about that far up the blade. That's a little bit more than I normally have put on them in the past. I found that edge is very useful. So therefore I want to take all of that off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the shoulder of that grind up like this. I'm going to take it up nice and high, so it'll give me a nice flat edge all along there. But where you want to start with your file work is right at the edge of the, let me take a little bit off here and show you right what I was talking about. Right at the edge where the factory grind meets the flat of the blade. That's the part where you want to take that angle down all the way, starting from there, down to the edge. Now you can see here that I've taken the steel down into a nice flat edge all the way along that length. It does take some pretty steady file work. You got to keep your angle exactly the same and work it until you have all that steel gone. While I have the machete in this position, the next thing I'm going to want to do is take off the shoulder of the factory edge along here. That's the start of my convex. What I want to do is just take off the very top part of that curve. This is the part that wedges when the machete bites into wood, and if that is curved, if it's rounded, it bites a lot deeper. You want to have just enough angle so that the file doesn't touch the flat of the blade. You're trying to take off the very top of that edge. Just break it some. Once I get the first part of the factory grind broken down at the top, I'm going to increase my angle just a little bit and continue that along. Now you can do this with sandpaper. You can do a lot of different ways you can convex an edge. I do it with a file because it's quick and it works for me, and when I do the final polish it takes any of the defects which I've left in it. Make sure you take control of the blade when you remove the clamp because it's already getting sharp. I've taken off most of the steel I want to with the file. It's the quickest way to do it. I've got a start on my convex here. I can rectify that with sandpaper or whatever if I feel like it later. I also use a stone to work the very edge of it. I don't use the file to create the very edge. What I'd like to do now is show what I do on the spine, and I've got the other side of this to do, which I won't bother filming because you've already seen the process. Now as it comes from the factory, the spine of a Tramontina machete is just a rough steel stamping. It's just been whacked out with a machine. As such, it has a very irregular surface, which I like to sharpen up. There's also on the handle, you can see that the wood is a little bit higher than the metal. I like to take down that wood so it doesn't tear up your hand. As you start, you'll see immediately all the irregularities appear in the top of the spine. You just want to keep filing until they're all gone. You want to file on top of the spine until you can feel that the edge is at a sharp right angle, especially on the left side of the blade, if you're a right-handed person, that's the edge you want to be in an acute right angle. Then we're going to back the blade up in the vise and continue that flat all the way to the tip. You can see what I'm left with now is a very fine, finished flat edge along the entire length of the machete. Now the forward portion of the machete, from about here forward, I want nice and round. The way it is right now, it would tear my hands to shreds. So what I'm going to do is, with the machete angled at about a 45 degree, I'm going to break off that edge until I have it broken on both sides, and then go back and forth over the top, and then we'll finish up the edge with a piece of sandpaper. Now that I've filed out all the flats on there, I give it a nice polished edge with a piece of old 80 grit sandpaper. Just give it a shoe shine treatment. From about there forward, you just fold the paper over the edge of the machete. That leaves a nice rounded edge, which is extremely comfortable. Nothing to grab a hold of your hand or tear it up if you're holding the back of the blade. Now the base of the blade here is still at an acute right angle, and that will make shavings right off the back of there. You can hold the handle and the blade at the same time, and you won't damage your hand. Now the only real secret to getting your scandi right is, I know that my scandi stops right here, so what I'm going to do is flip it over and mark it with a Sharpie, so I know where to stop my scandi grind on the back side of the blade when I flip it over. Now I'm going to turn it around and do the other side, and then when that's all finished, I'll put it on the stone and give it a final sharpening.